I'm just kidding. There are no windows.
Hold on. I know that voice.
Even if I did let you in.
No, yeah, I swear I know him from somewhere. Josh Sundquist? I'm sure it comes as no surprise that, following my last video on Mech Cadets, I'd make another specifically about how the show handles disability. The whole thing is just one long breath of fresh air, honestly. Actually, though, before we get into the meat of this video and talk about Frank Olivetti, and why I'm so excited about his voice actor, I want to talk about something kinda related but not. Spoilers ahead, obviously. I want to talk about how this show handles injuries. The reason I want to do this is because while it's not always a sure thing, sometimes looking at how a show handles character injuries can give an idea of how they handle disabilities. And in this case, it does match up pretty well. What I find to be not exactly unique, but notable about this show is that the injuries various characters sustain actually have weight. This is typically a good sign. When Chief Max breaks her leg, she's genuinely down for the count for a bit, and spends the rest of the season on crutches. When Maya is reckless during a training session and gets herself and Big Red, her robo, injured, the echoes of that injury follow her for several episodes even after she's physically healed. She loses some of her confidence, and her guilt over getting Big Red hurt makes her hesitant to put them in the line of fire again. It comes to a head when she and Captain Tanaka are sent out as a duo because everyone else is either out of commission or needed elsewhere. Her hesitation very nearly costs them dearly and in part leads to Tombo, Tanaka's robo, being injured. I'm not going to say that's entirely on her because they were fighting a shark, but still. Now, robos being injured is an entirely different ballgame. I'm going to keep calling it injured rather than damaged, though, because I feel that helps to drive home the point that they're sapient beings. Regardless, I don't know if robos actually heal on their own at all, or if everything has to be done by the engineering crew. Because I have so little information on how the robos work in this aspect, I can't really analyze how their injuries are treated on the whole. We do know that they feel pain in some capacity, at least, because Tanaka specifically says so.
They'll know your thoughts, your training. You will feel their pain.
I can, however, note that Tombo is definitely the robo that gets beat up the worst this season. Other than Big Red, I'm not sure any of the others actually get hit hard enough to hurt. Still, even though I don't entirely know how they work, looking at Tombo does give us a mini arc about pushing too hard while still in recovery and worsening your situation because of it. Because Tanaka couldn't stay grounded and leave a bunch of teenagers to fight off an extraterrestrial threat on their own, unfortunately Tombo either isn't fully repaired or hasn't had enough time to heal, so in that final showdown with the Shark Queen, they lose an arm. And I do mean that in the most literal sense possible, considering it was sucked into an artificial black hole. Their thrusters also end up failing at a pivotal moment, leading to Olivia getting lost in space. With Tombo down an arm, Chief Clark comes up with the suggestion to replace it with a Hero Force arm. This isn't entirely without precedent, since we do know that robos can exchange parts between each other with no issue, but it's never been done with anything that didn't come from a donor robo before. I don't have much more to say about this, because the replacement happens so late in the season that we don't know how this will affect Tombo in the long run, or if it even will. Potentially, they're now the robo equivalent of an amputee, but there's just not enough data to say for sure at this point. It would be really interesting to examine both that and Tanaka's side of the equation, though, as someone who literally felt Tombo's pain when they lost their arm, but still has all of his original flesh limbs. I can imagine that would really mess with your head. Speaking of amputees, though, it's time to talk about our boy, Frank Olivetti. Frank is an above-the-knee amputee, and so is his voice actor, Josh Sundquist. If you, like me, were wondering why his voice sounds so incredibly familiar...
Last summer, my health insurance company here in California sent a nurse to my apartment here in Santa Monica to examine me, like in real life, because, get this, according to their computer system, my body weight is very low for my height.
Yeah, that guy. You might also recognize him from any number of his iconic Halloween costumes. He's also a former Paralympic skier and current member of the US amputee soccer team. I don't know how much input he had on the character he voices, but regardless, this is great to see. It's kind of funny, though, for the casting of this animated series to take into account the disability of a character and hire someone with that same life experience, when one of the most common critiques I have of live-action disabled characters is them being played by able-bodied actors. Not that the show being animated makes it any better if they had hired an able-bodied actor, but animation as a medium has a history of the whole "it's animated, anyone can voice anyone" excuse. I'm not surprised that Mech Cadets did this, though. As far as I can tell, it's actively color-conscious in its casting, too. Back to Frank, though. Frank Olivetti is the son of a renowned pilot and joined Skycorps Academy to follow in his mother's footsteps. For the first few episodes of the show, he uses a state-of-the-art prosthetic provided to him by the program itself. That's great, you might think. It's awesome that they do that for him. I might even agree with you, if that had been what he wanted. Except he doesn't, because Frank is something we so rarely get to see in stories about amputees, especially if they're even a little bit sci-fi. He is someone who actually prefers life without the prosthetic. He'd rather just use his crutches. He even expressed this during his interview, and got a response I'm sure a lot of disabled people, myself included, can relate to.
You can understand that it's just not feasible to adjust the exosuit for one person.
Now, this is garbage. It's garbage in the show, and it's garbage in real life. But a lot of the time, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Fighting people on this can either jeopardize whatever position you do have, or if you've been denied one for discriminatory reasons, well, that's a whole other thing, and if you actually want to fight that, it's going to take so much time and energy, not to mention money that you probably don't have. I once actually had the pleasure of watching someone realize in real time that what he was saying, suggesting that because of my disability the program I was interested in wouldn't be able to accept me, was actively illegal. That was fun. Frank, though, had the opportunity to join Skycorps if he just shut up and accepted the leg. So that's what he did, even though he doesn't like it.
Man, this thing is annoying. Still pinches in the worst spots sometimes.
Then, a little less than halfway through the season, Frank's leg is destroyed when a shark gets loose on the campus and breaks into the dorms. Maya and Frank actually end up using the damaged leg to kill the shark, and if their blood wasn't blue, this would actually be a pretty gnarly scene. It's during the panic with the shark that we really get a taste of Frank at his best. Because, sure, he was a capable fighter before, but he looks and feels so much more confident on his crutches than he ever did with the leg. They even give him a badass panning shot to reveal him standing with his crutches for the first time. It's awesome. However, because the leg is so state-of-the-art, getting it replaced is a bit of a hassle. This grounds Frank, which makes him feel bad because he can't help his friends in the field anymore, and after that stunt Chief Clark and General Park tried to pull with Buddy after Stanford was expelled, he's naturally worried about his own place in the program. Enter Ava, who is the undisputed queen of this season, honestly. Because I'm not sure what Frank's fate would have been without her. If there's something people in positions of power despise doing, it's admitting they were wrong. Even worse if they have to admit they actively lied. Ava, of course, could not care less about what the higher-ups at Skycorps think. She's an engineer first, and her job is to fix problems. Frank has no leg. Repairing the prosthesis would either take too long or it would just have to be replaced outright. Okay, let's do exactly what General Park said was impossible, and adapt his exosuit so he can use his crutches when not in the field. Actually, I'm a little bit convinced that Chief Max was in on this too, that she and Ava planned something like this together from the very beginning. How else do you explain Frank's weapons also doubling as something akin to crutches, allowing him to do things that feel more natural to him, even while piloting a giant sapient robot from space? I'm not sure how or when Max would have found out that Frank prefers crutches, but she's one of the good, trustworthy adults in this show. I am entirely convinced that this is something she would do. The engineering team, at least, have Frank's back, and that's genuinely nice to see. He spends the rest of the season only using his prosthetic in the field and otherwise sticking to his crutches. And I love that for him, I genuinely do. I do not, however, love his crutches. Because, you see, before I had the wheelchair and cane combo I use today, I used forearm crutches a lot. I used exactly the same kind of forearm crutches as Frank does, in fact. Which is how I know they cannot possibly be the ideal model for him. These are an incredibly basic design. The entire upper part is made up of one stiff piece of material, presumably plastic, and while I love my crutches for what they did for me, they were also so fucking annoying. Funny thing, actually, the first time I ever saw a video by Josh Sundquist, I got what I can only describe as crutch envy. I used to fantasize about having crutches with closed cuffs. Do you know how frustrating it is to get up, walk to the kitchen, make a snack or a drink, and then realize you either have to leave one crutch behind for the return trip, or ask for help in carrying because you can't let go of the handle because your crutches have open cuffs? Please, I am begging you, let Frank have more practical crutches. Hell, use the actor you hired to voice him as inspiration, even. Aside from the crutches, though, I really love Frank and his storyline this season, in part because it's about more than just his disability. Sure, there is that, and it is really important to him as a character, and brings up a lot of real issues around how disabled people are dismissed, especially if they dare to have a need, or even a preference, that those in power view as more hassle than it's worth. But he's also Stanford's first friend on the team. He's a good cook, and he and Maya have the beginnings of a really sweet little romance going. Actually, Frank and Maya are the only characters with a romance arc this season, which I appreciate for a multitude of reasons. First, because disabled characters, especially when they're not the main character, aren't often portrayed as having serious romantic prospects. Not ones that aren't then portrayed as somehow heroic or saintly for loving said disabled character anyway. Second, the show didn't need romance to be good. It had other relationships to develop and establish. The only reason Frank and Maya work as well as they do is because their starting point is as really close friends who are only a few steps away from becoming a couple already. Third, Frank learned how to cook some of Maya's favorite foods, and that's just adorable. In conclusion, I really love what this show did with Frank, and I hope if we get a second season that this energy continues going forward. And I'd love to see some further exploration of the consequences of Tombo losing their arm, both for them and for Tanaka. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, consider liking it and maybe subscribing. A massive thank you to the Entmoot, Pastel Pink Firefox, and Ronja Adams Ramstedt. I will be back here Thursday after next. Bye!